So good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I hate to stop all the networking that's going on in this room, because for many of us, this is the first time that we've actually gathered together in person. So for those in the room, thank you for being here. And for those who are joining us virtually, thank you also, because I know that for many of you, getting here is impossible and there's still health considerations which stop people traveling. My name's Ken Gordon, and I am the current, I'll come on to that, Executive Director of the Northwest Association for Biomedical Research. And so I'm just going to do a wee bit of housekeeping, and then I'm going to introduce Dr. Aaron Putsky, who is going to get our lunchtime gala underway. And I have promised to Retha Weeks that every time I say the word evening tonight, I'm going to pay her $5, because we're so used to doing this in the evening that I just default to evening. So welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being here at this hybrid event. And so, and this is unusual, this is our first ever hybrid gala, so we're hoping that the gods of the internet will cooperate, so please bear with us as we have to transition from our virtual presenters to our live presenters. Just a housekeeping. So for the virtual audience, we've done lots of testing. The only troubles people have ever had is some sound issues. And generally that's been resolved if you're having those sound issues by logging off and logging on again, maybe rebooting your computer. If you keep having issues, you can put a message into the question box, and Michael Oppenheimer, who's the second camera that's showing you the room, can maybe respond and give you some IT help. If things fail, early next week, we will send out a link to this recording. So if you really want to see this gala twice, you can watch the recording. For the in-person audience, again, thank you so much for being here. We know that we've got some people in the room with dietary issues. So if you do not want the amazing salmon that's in front of you, just please throw up your hand, your plate will be taken away, and you'll get whatever you need. So just wave and staff will come and help you, so please. So we're going to get started in a second, but before I move on, any other questions about the room, the facilities? Everyone's comfortable? Okay, great. I just have to acknowledge before we move on the sponsors for this event, because as you know, it's a fundraiser for NWABR, and it costs money to hire a venue, to put on this amazing food. And so I want to acknowledge our sponsors, Advara, WCG, We Work for Health and Pharma, and a new sponsor for us this year, DML Insurance. DML are the brokers that we use at NWABR, and in fact, they're the brokers that I've used for my entire time in the nonprofit world in the United States. And they're just amazing at working with us to make sure that we have the adequate insurance that we need, and we're not paying an arm and a leg for it. So Dina, thank you so much for being here. And then just briefly, the agenda for today. As I said, Dr. Putsky is going to join us. He'll be joining us virtually in a second to do a formal introduction. I'm going to then talk about the year and the decade that was. And then we've got our various awardees that will come out. I'll come back to you and actually ask you to consider making a donation to NWABR. And we're going to close with our engagement manager at NWABR, Jen Robleski. So, Dr. Aaron Putsky. As many of you know, Aaron is he's a professor and chair of the Department of Biology at Whitworth University. And he's joining virtual, so please bear with me as I make this happen. And it's not entirely seamless. And it requires me to see with my progressives.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to NWABR's #ThanksResearch Lunchtime Hybrid Gala. I'm Aaron Putsky, Board President of NWABR, and I am really excited to have you all joining us today. This hybrid event comes with lots of advantages. You can view this from anywhere in the world, and today we have attendees from across the country and from Canada. I also want to acknowledge the guests who've been able to join us in person today as we celebrate biomedical research in the Pacific Northwest. This lunchtime event also allows us to be a bit more casual and forces us to keep the program moving, as we know that many of you will be dashing off at 1 p.m. to continue your vital research. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so glad that you can join us for this afternoon's celebration of biomedical research and science. We have two key themes for this event: the need to thank research, hence #ThanksResearch, and the imperative for us all to build trust in this critically important work. We know that trust and research development go hand in hand. We need trust to provide the moral authority necessary to undertake research with new drugs and devices, to undertake research with animal models, and ultimately to roll out research trials with human volunteers. To ensure we have the privilege of doing this work, we must preserve and build trust. Building trust has become increasingly complicated as we have moved into more polarized times. This just means that we must work harder to open the black box that is science and show people how we in research work stuff out rather than make stuff up. As many of you know, the use of animal models is a precursor to human trials. A recent survey by ILAR showed a growing level of mistrust in animal research. For many in the field, this was a shocking result. But even more shocking were the misperceptions that respondents had about the care provided to animals in research. Once these misperceptions were corrected, many respondents expressed improved views about animal research. So here's the rub. The respondents had these misperceptions because as a field, we have for too long let people and groups with strong anti-science, anti-research agendas tell our stories. NWABR exists to try and counter these negative stories and to promulgate stories of amazing research and science. The founders of NWABR were aware of the importance of trust in biomedical research when they created the organization 35 years ago. And for all of that time, the mission of NWABR has been a variation of promoting the public's trust and ethical conduct in biomedical research. In this afternoon's event, we are going to focus on efforts to build trust in this vital work. Our plan is to highlight your work, including highly successful efforts that have built trust, and we want to do a little fundraising, and then allow you to get back to your day in under an hour. That said, for those of you in the room, we have this venue booked for the entire afternoon, so please feel free to continue networking once the formal program wraps up. No one's going to be kicking you out. This afternoon, our time together will include Ken Gordon, the Executive Director, who will report to you formally on the year that has just gone by. Then our Treasurer, Greg Yondel, will present Edison Awards to acknowledge two NWABR board members that retired from the board earlier this year, and who each made singular contributions to NWABR becoming a more responsive and relevant organization. Gordon Roble, NWABR's Vice President, will then introduce the recipients of NWABR's Alvin J. Thompson Award. The two recipients this year are Dr. Donald E. Lowe, MD, FACS, Head of Thoracic Surgery and Thoracic Oncology at Virginia Mason, and Dr. Walter J. Yerba, MD, PhD, Chief Medical Officer at Providence Cancer Institute. Gordon will then introduce the Buster and Nancy D. Alvord Award, which this year is being presented to Miss Susan Ash, who has recently retired from her role at the helm of the Health Sciences and Services Authority of Spokane County. As the event wraps up, Ken Gordon will also return to ask you all to consider making a donation to NWABR. The board members of NWABR have already committed over $20,000 of their own money to NWABR this year. So this afternoon, we will be asking you, the members of our incredibly supportive research community, to add your contribution. Funds will support the ongoing outreach work that NWABR undertakes, aimed at both raising the profile of and support for biomedical research in the Pacific Northwest. Now, before I pass the baton to Ken to highlight NWABR's year, I just want to share a few sincere thank yous. First, I want to acknowledge all of you for being here for our annual celebration and research. I also want to thank our event sponsors, Advara, WCGIRB, Pharma, We Work for Health, and DML Insurance. Thank you all for your support of our organization and this event. The board of NWABR, which consists of 43 board members, does an amazing job of stewarding our modest resources to make an outsized impact in both the Northwest and nationally. Board members represent some of the most forward-thinking, dedicated, and innovative research organizations that break new ground and create new knowledge literally on a daily basis. This new knowledge rebounds to the benefit of science, the benefit of animal health, the benefit of individuals' health, and as we have learned these past few years, to the benefit of the world. There is no doubt that the contribution of our member organizations has been and will continue to be pivotal to our world returning to an improved place post this pandemic. Having said that, it is now my pleasure to welcome NWABR's Executive Director, Ken Gordon.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you for all the support that you provide to NWABR. In May 2014, I stood before the NWABR Gala for the first time, and I showed this image because this image really just showed my experience with biomedical research, which is basically having a lot of interfacing with the health system, particularly the emergency room system, because I was a keen athlete, but I was also very clumsy. To underlie how clumsy I am, on the day of the event, I actually fell down the stairs at the office, and I was speaking to the gala with my ankle in a boot, and I was on crutches. I can report in the last 10 years, I've learned a lot more about biomedical research, and I feel like I know this community a lot more than I did 10 years ago. And also my trips to the ER have slowed down quite dramatically. When we started planning this event, I was asked to talk about the last year, 2023, for NWABR. But since the time we started planning the event, I had accepted another job, and I'll be starting shortly as the CEO of the Washington State Veterinary Medical Association. So I thought I'd use this opportunity of the gala to both talk about what NWABR has done in the last year, but also have a reflection on my last 10 years with this amazing field. At that gala 10 years ago, I also shared this image of the Duomo in Florence. I've always been fascinated by these cathedrals, because when they start building them, they were genuinely intergenerational projects. The people who started building the project would pass them on to their families, and the families will continue the work and pass them on to the families. And the construction of this particular cathedral in Florence started in 1296. And the actual construction time took something like 140 years, so a genuine intergenerational project. But the thing I really loved about this particular cathedral is that they wanted to build this amazing dome, and hence the name of the building, the Duomo. But at the time they started the construction, they had no idea how they were actually going to build this amazing edifice, this dome, it was actually a double-hulled dome. But they started with the sure knowledge that the technology, the knowledge would develop over the time of that construction. And so 124 years after they originally started building the main, the base of the building, they commenced building the dome, and it took a further 16 years to create this building. And I argued at the time that much biomedical research operates under similar kinds of timeframes. It's a generational project where one scientist or one researcher will take an idea and develop it so far, and will pass it on to the next researcher who will do the same thing, and they will pass that on, and so on. And maybe for much research, this is still true. Yet what we saw with the pandemic is this community came together and moved essentially at light speed to develop vaccines and new treatments for the symptoms that people were experiencing as they got the coronavirus. And tools like CRISPR have really helped speed up the development of genetic and immunotherapy treatments for people. When I first started the NWABR in 2014, human trials that involved recombinant DNA were very rare, and they were big issues. And today, those trials are commonplace, and we now actually have treatments which have been approved by FDA that use recombinant DNA for rare diseases. As an organization, NWABR has also seen a sea change in its operation over the last 10 years. When I took over in 2014, the organization really didn't know exactly what it was going to be doing. It had lost some federal grants, and it was trying to figure out what its new role in the world was going to be. And I can report now the organization is solid, it's strong. We have 43 board members, and we've been providing, just in the last year, educational opportunities to thousands of people. And these educational opportunities are through conferences and other presentations. And also, we've been also helping to lead a national discussion about the importance of openness in research. We've also been helping to educate the generation of diverse scientists and researchers through our summer camp programs. Many of the students from the camp programs are online with us right now, and Priya is actually in the room right at the table at the back of the room. And so I really want to thank you so much for joining us and seeing how this work of fundraising and acknowledging research works. I can tell you honestly that we are in good hands with these really smart, caring, and thoughtful young people who are going to come up, and they'll be taking over our positions in the very near future. At NWABR, we do this work with a very small staff, and I want to acknowledge Jen Robleski, Wendy Russick, and Mounty Koshik. I also want to acknowledge Sarah Louie and Nathan Wells, who worked with Wendy and Mounty to teach our summer camp programs over this last summer. As I already mentioned, I have 43 board members, and they are very generous in terms of the time they give, the knowledge they bring, and of course they also bring us donations to help the organization. We also have 37 volunteers who help with planning our various conferences. And it would be negligent for me not to recognize Retha Weeks and Kim Stocking. As we've started to move back to real life events, Retha and Kim have often been the volunteers at the front of the rooms, welcoming you as you come back to those live events. The one constant that has remained there for the entire time I've been at NWABR is the importance of communicating what we do to the public. Todd Meyer, who's a former board member of NWABR, was always fond of quoting Arthur C. Clarke. And Arthur C. Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I think that for a lot of our people in the community, when they get sick, they assume that they can go to their physician and get a treatment as if by magic. And I think we have to get better at sharing with them what's actually involved in actually producing those treatments. We need to get better at sharing what's involved in developing those treatments, how long it takes, what it costs in terms of benchtop research, preclinical research, and clinical trials. Because if we fail to communicate this complexity, then we'll lose the public trust that is essential to everything that we do. If I was just to point to one accomplishment during my time at NWABR, it would be that we have initiated the process of allowing science and research to be justifiably proud of sharing their work. To use another analogy, we are pulling back the curtain to show the infinitely complex and caring machine that is biomedical research. During the summer camp this summer, I shared with the students excerpts from the movie The Human Trial, And this is a movie about a treatment for type 1 diabetes. It's a genetic treatment. And it takes the audience through the long preclinical process where they worked on the treatment in animal models, the process as they move to type 1, to phase 1 trials, and then all the complications of getting FDA approvals, of raising the money to keep doing this work, and the professional and personal obligations that were wrapped up with this work. And the movie really just goes over a 14-year process where they stayed in phase 1 trials, trying to finesse the product to make sure it worked so they could move to phase 2 and phase trials. At the end of the session, I asked the students that given how demonstrably hard this work is, I asked them, would you want to be involved? And I thought that seeing how hard and costly and frustrating and slow the process was, the students would go, oh my God, no, they would be scared away by it. And in fact, it was the exact opposite. It was almost like this wiping away the stereotype that you could have a quick, easy cure actually made it more real for them. It stopped being a stereotype and they could see themselves actually in the different roles as scientists, researchers, communicators, and even participants. So that's my biggest takeaway from 10 years in this field. Showing our messy, complex, frustrating, and costly work to the community actually helps to build trust in the community. Sharing our failures, our grits, and our successes shows people that we're real, that we're true, that we're honest, that we're trustworthy. And these are the things that make our work real and build support for the same. So to you all, for this, my last gala at NWABR, I want to thank you for allowing me the honor to be in this role. And I do wish you all the best in the future. And I just hope you all know that NWABR in me has a supporter for life. And so we're going to transition now. And so Greg Andel is going to come up and recognize our next 2 awardees. Greg is the Director of Research Finance at Providence. And so Greg, over to you.
Hey everybody. As Aaron and Ken have mentioned, NWABR is an organization that's now 35-ish years old. The board has 43 members. These board members generously give of their time, talent, and treasure to ensure that NWABR provides great services and remains relevant and trusted resource for the Northwest biomedical research community. In addition to the members of NWABR, we have approximately 37 current additional volunteers that provide some degree of voluntary service to the organization and to the community at large. Since 2014, a further 56 board members have cycled off the board and 1 executive director as they have retired or changed roles. We cannot overstate the value that these 136 people, 137, bring and have brought to NWABR's operations over this tumultuous decade. We are a better, stronger, and more nimble organization because of the immense voluntary contributions from people like Dr. John Rawl and Ms. Ramsey Cox, who are being honored by NWABR today. Dr. John Rawl is an Associate Vice President for Health Sciences Research and a Professor and Vice Dean for Research, the Elson S. Floyd College of Medicine at the Washington State University. Dr. Rawl is also President of the Washington State Academy of Sciences. He joined the board of NWABR in 2017 and has been instrumental in strengthening NWABR's relationship with Wazoo, our outreach to the eastern side of Washington, and NWABR's ongoing commitment to science education. Ms. Ramsey Cox has had a shorter term on NWABR's board, joining in 2021. However, during that limited time, she has been instrumental in developing NWABR's communications and public engagement programs. She brought her immense experience in these fields, which has included working with Quinn Thomas, patient advocacy groups, and as a journalist in DC, and as the communications director for US Representative Susan Delbene. In particular, Ms. Cox was instrumental in developing NWABR's revamped communications conferences and has energized our social media efforts. It is my considerable pleasure to present Dr. John Rawl and Ms. Ramsey Cox to you as they receive their Edison Awards for helping to shine a light on science.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor, and it's been a pleasure to be associated with this fantastic organization. Wish you the best.
Yeah, thank you so much. When I very first joined the board, Sally was the chair, and now it's Aaron, and you have great leadership, and Ken makes it incredibly easy to serve on your board. Really, to be honest, Jen and Ken were the ones who had the idea for #ThanksResearch, and then they came to me and said, how can we make this a bigger thing? And I was so honored to help, and will continue to help in any way I can, because I truly believe in this organization. And as Ken already said, it's so important to tell your stories. Your opposition is few but loud, and so it's incredibly important that everyone knows your hard work is what's developing cures and treatments that benefit all of our lives. So please, don't be modest. Get out there and tell your stories. Thank you.
We say of our former board members, we use that line from the Hotel California, you can check out, but you can never leave. It's now my pleasure to ask Gordon Roble to come forward and present the next series of awards. Gordon is the Associate Vice President of Shared Resources and the attending veterinarian at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center. So Gordon.
Thank you very much. And as much as we are going to miss Ken in NWABR as a veterinarian, I'm incredibly excited that he is moving into the Washington State Veterinary Association. It will benefit greatly from his expertise being there. So as a member, I'm also excited because he's not going far in my perspective. But thank you. So each year, the board of NWABR presents the Alvin J. Thompson Award to an awardee or awardees that have achieved high standing in the life sciences research community. Nominees should be known for or engaged in cutting edge research and must demonstrate a commitment to ethical research practices and advancement of public trust in research. And this year we're making 2 awards. These awards are going to Dr. Donald E. Lowe, head thoracic surgeon and thoracic oncology at Virginia Mason, and Dr. Walter J. Erba, Chief Medical Officer, Providence Center Cancer Institute, and Director, Early A. Child's Research Institute. So Dr. Lowe's thoracic surgical career includes extensive research to improve the health of his patients. He has also collaborated on a worldwide database to determine and share best practices to improve the outcome of individuals with esophageal cancer. Dr. Lowe supports international surgical research fellows by exposing them to varied approaches and inspiring them to always ask questions on how best to improve their patients' well-being. Dr. Lowe is also building our future generations of surgeons, and even though retired, continues this quest. Dr. Lowe's latest work is collaborating with international institutions on breakthrough approaches, including early diagnosis of esophageal cancer by utilizing the patient's breaths as a diagnostic tool. This work is very promising. Dr. Lowe is an inspiration. He provides a solid background for future researchers. He is humble, accomplished, runs the historical archives, and cares for people deeply. All of this accomplished while working as a surgical practice on a full-time basis. He is truly an extraordinary individual. And following, Dr. Walter Erba is a pioneer and key figure in the development of immunotherapy as the 4th pillar of cancer treatment. While at the National Cancer Institute, in the 1980s, he was part of the team that standardized IL-2 dosing as an integral part of the cytokine working group. This foundational work led to FDA approval of the first immunotherapy for cancer, IL-2, in renal cell carcinoma, done in 1992, and followed for melanoma in 1997. In 1993, Dr. Erba joined Providence to establish a cancer program and lead translational research in Oregon. Under his leadership, Providence Cancer Institute of Oregon and his research arm, the Early A. Child's Research Institute, became a global leader in cancer immunotherapy. So Dr. Erba's extensive experience as a principal investigator advanced the development of biological agents, including monoclonals, cytokines, vaccines, and adoptive cellular therapy. Most notably, Dr. Erba led the global clinical trial for ipilimumab, which led to FDA approval in 2011 as the first checkpoint immunotherapy for the treatment of cancer, ushering in a new era of immuno-oncology. And in 2014, he received the Oregon History Makers Award for his achievement. So during his prolific career spanning 4 decades, Dr. Erba's contributions to the field of immuno-oncology include 270 publications, countless presentations in international conferences, and service on numerous governance committees. And through his commitment to training the next generation of scientists and clinicians, numerous clinical fellows, postdoctoral, and junior faculty, these all have benefited from Dr. Erba's mentoring and guidance. And so he remains an active investigator and is the Providence PI for the ASCO-sponsored TAPR study and the AACR-sponsored Project Genie consortium. He is also a Providence co-PI for the BMS-sponsored International Immuno-Oncology Network, comprising 16 sites worldwide. In 2022, Providence garnered worldwide recognition for the first demonstration of metastatic pancreatic cancer regression through gene-engineered adoptive cell therapy developed under Dr. Erba's leadership. So I'd like to invite Dr. Lowe to join us to receive his award, and then we will share a pre-recorded clip of Dr. Erba's acceptance.
Gordon, thank you. Whenever you lead off by telling a full-time practicing surgeon that he's humble, that's always high praise, so I appreciate it. Thank you very much. When Ken asked me to tell you a little bit about what we're doing research, I'll start by saying that my entire career has been a full-time clinician, but I've been interested in the aspects of impacting the way we treat with the difficult clinical conditions, specifically esophageal cancer. I'm going to tell you about what we believe is going to be the future of clinical research with a new methodology that we've designed over the last decade. And I'm going to use esophageal cancer and specifically esophagectomy as my example today. Esophagectomy, as many as you know, is typically done for esophageal cancer. The esophagus is the muscular tube that joins the throat and the stomach. You're all using it at this moment to consume this lunch. When a cancer occurs, you have to take this out. You have to replace it with a tubularized stomach, which extends and is reconnected up in the neck. You have to work in the neck, chest, and abdomen, and it's routinely been identified as one of the most complex oncologic procedures that is done as a routine. The reality is that there's a multiplicity of methodologies that surgeons have advocated over the time frame. I will tell you that the problem that we have dealt with over the last 20 years is all of these surgical groups with the best intentions in the world have been working in their own silos, and nobody has been collaborating. We also identified well over a decade ago that we had a major problem. We looked at the aspects of mortality rates with respect to this operation in the United States, and both low and high volume centers demonstrated that between 1 and 2 patients out of every 10 that were undergoing the operation weren't surviving the operation. This is a problem irrespective of everything else that we're doing in oncologic work. When it comes to the aspect of mortality, it is almost always related to complications that are associated with the procedure. And you can see that we are well aware that complications not only affects mortality, but affects length of stay, costs, quality of life, readmission rates, and every aspect of survival. So complications are at the baseline of what impairs us from delivering successful oncologic treatment. If you want to know what the situation was, and this is only 10 years ago, this is a meta-analysis that actually came out of England, highlighting the fact that outcome reporting for esophageal cancer surgery is heterogeneous and inconsistent and lacks methodological rigor. A consensus approach to reporting clinical outcomes should be considered, and at a minimum, it is recommended that a core outcome set is defined and used in all studies reporting outcomes for esophageal cancer surgery. This will allow meaningful cross-study comparisons and analysis to evaluate results moving forward. This same study looked at 122 individual reports, almost 58,000 resections. They showed that no single complication was reported in all papers. 61% did not define any of their complications. Anastomotic leakage, that's the breakdown of the connection point between the new esophagus and the old esophagus, was the most commonly reported complication in 80%, but they only used a definition in 28%, and that 28% had 22 different definitions. We couldn't even agree on how we reported mortality directly related to the operation. So did we have a problem? It was a huge problem. So we got together in Newcastle in 2011, and these are 21 centers representing high volume practice across the world. And we said to ourselves, we have a problem and we need to solve it. And through meeting at a series of international esophageal outcomes events and producing a Delphi survey, we actually, for the first time, produced a basic platform that would be used, we hoped, moving forward to make sure that we standardized the methodology under which we classified morbidity associated with this operation. We also took the opportunity for the first time to produce standardized and consistent definition for the major complications. And we also, for the first time, identified what are the other quality measures that we need to look at as a routine as we're monitoring these patients, i.e. how we use blood, where are people discharged to, how many people have to be readmitted, etc. This led to this publication, which was the methodology in which we used to release the opportunity for this to become an international standard. And then because we had a standard, we decided it was time to really look at the impact of this operation internationally. And that's when we moved to do something that had never been done before. We decided that rather than working on our own silos, we needed to amalgamate the international experience from the esophageal community into a single data set that for the first time was not involving a university data set, but was actually online. And so our goals were to document the contemporary incidence of complications, to identify that our definitions might work for the big complications, but most importantly, can we do clinical trials with this online data set? We decided to do a study between January 2015 and June 2016. We looked to accrue 1,500 patients. We almost doubled that with 2,700 patients. This led to a subsequent publication in 2017 that for the first time identified the fact that we knew what the morbidity was with respect to this complex operation. Now you might say to yourself, okay, we designed this, we have beta tested it in our own institution, but has it seen penetrance throughout the world? Well, this meta-analysis that came out of Oxford actually just last year looked at all the papers reporting outcomes of esophagectomy between 2016 and 2020. And even though we only list the complications profile in 2015, almost 50% of the papers reporting outcomes were using this classification. This classification is also embedded in the national oncologic databases of 6 countries. This is the one from Holland reporting their national results. We are also serving now as the national database for the Republic of Ireland and the 5 centers there doing esophageal resections. And this is the opportunity that they did to report their natural results versus international results. The website has been active since 2017. This shows the original centers. The important thing that we had to recognize is that for the very first time, centers that never did this before were actually having to share their data, which means they had to enter it on the website. I'm happy to be able to tell you that the design of this website allowed us to require no institutional software installation, no local IT support was needed. There was no need for software updates and no institutional maintenance, which made it as easy as possible. Also, for the first time, all contributing centers to the EsoData dataset could access through their cell phone. They're up to date, and this was updated moment to moment, data anywhere in the world that they chose to have it reviewed. We also identified that for the first time, we knew what the toll of morbidity was associated with esophagectomies. And if you're asking were we dismayed the fact that almost 60% of patients had complications, that's true. But at least now we have a platform to study how we can decrease that particular severe toll. We also knew that big complications such as an anastomotic leak, we could identify how these were managed because we had definitions. We also could identify the most common complications. And we also were pleased to see that mortality that had been very high a decade ago had been impacted. And we knew this was an accurate statement of the results at the time. The data set has moved on. We can now track the aspects of how we're delivering care with esophagectomy services. We know about presenting demographics of the groups, and this is only following up over the 4 years of the data set. We also know how the operative approaches are evolving over short periods of time. This one is demonstrating that minimally invasive esophagectomy has usurped open operations in just the 2 years of follow-up. Other studies have come from the data set. This is the first to identify the risk prediction model for 90-day mortality. This was done by a contributing institution in Marseille, but using the EsoData data set as its data source. And this is the first publication to actually compare in real time the contemporary outcomes between the different approaches for esophageal resection. This is the original group that founded the data set. These are the groups that are now contributing, 75 individual institutions from 20 countries all over the world. And even though this sounds very common in a modern parlance, this aspect of data collaboration internationally, considering all of the security concerns and all of the privacy agreements that we have to deal with, is really a revolutionary aspect of reporting clinical outcomes. As of June 2023, we have almost 19,000 resections. I'll remind you that a high volume esophagectomy unit in the United States of America in 2023 is an institution that does over 13 operations. So this is a very large number. What is our next step? Well, you all are aware that the American Joint Commission is responsible for producing updates in our staging systems for all cancers across the board. The AJCC has now commissioned EsoData to collect the data for the next variation in AJCC 8 and 9 for esophageal cancer. This required the data set being updated, and you can see here the significant additions to the demographics, operative details, pathology reporting, and quality and survival data that the data set had to undergo to provide this data. So what is the EsoData data set accomplished? Well, we've standardized the reporting for complications. We've benchmarked the incidence of esophageal complications and quality outcomes. We facilitated the assessment of the technical evolution of the operation. And we've also demonstrated a resource for future studies and being able to change the data set over time. We've also demonstrated the ability to provide a robust data for the evolution of cancer staging in general. I'll also tell you that the greatest form of flattery is to have your situation replicated. I can tell you now that there are now 4 other major cancer subtypes that have replicated what we've done with EsoData, and we clearly believe it's going to be a contribution moving forward. So once again, thank you for the opportunity. I'm very honored with this reward, and Ken, I'm very proud of what I'm doing and allowing research, so I'm fulfilling your criteria.
That was 43 slides in just over 5 minutes, so I don't know how you did that. So just bear with me for a second, and I will. So Dr. Erva couldn't be here tonight, so we pre-recorded his acceptance.
Thank you, Gordon. It is my pleasure to accept the Alvin J. Thompson Award from the Northwest Association for Biomedical Research. I would like to thank those who nominated me and the board members for selecting me for this prestigious award. I Googled Dr. Alvin J. Thompson to see what he was about and learned that he was a great man. This of course enhances the meaning of this award to me personally. Dr. Thompson had an amazing career as a physician, community leader, and mentor in the Seattle area. It also turns out he was a gastroenterologist who practiced at Providence like I do. Among his many awards, and there were many, and other numerous activities, Dr. Thompson was a founding member of the Northwest Association for Biomedical Research. And this award has been given to some amazing individuals. Dr. Lee Hartwell of the Hutch also won a Nobel Prize. Dr. Lee Hood of ISB in Providence was a hero of mine during my graduate student days. He and Dr. Drucker at OHSU also won the Alaska Award. Francis Collins, who was recently the director of NIH and the founding director of the Human Genome Project, was also an award winner. Locally, Drs. Greg Folks and Saul Rifkin of Swedish were honored for their work in brain tumors and ovarian cancer. Noted philanthropists Phil and Penny Knight and the Allen Institute, without whose support many of the recent advances in science and medicine would not have been possible, were also honored with the Alvin J. Thompson Award. I am extremely proud and humbled to join their company. It has been my privilege to be part of research that has changed the landscape of the treatment of cancer. Providence's contributions to the work on the checkpoint inhibitors like Keytruda and Opdivo, which you see in ads on TV just about every day, has made immunotherapy an essential component of current therapy for cancer and is improving the lives of thousands of patients with cancer. Like all advances in science and medicine, this is not an individual achievement. Research is a team sport. Therefore, I'd like to give my thanks to my family, my many teachers, mentors, colleagues, and patients. I would like to close with a thank you to the Northwest Association of Biomedical Research, not just for this wonderful award, but for the work that you do to increase public understanding, support, and participation in the research process. Thank you.
The last award for this event is the Buster and Nancy D. Alvord Award. The Buster and Nancy D. Alvord Award is presented by NWABR to a person or an organization who has used their time, talent, or treasure to work for an improved biomedical research community. This year, we are honored to present this award to Ms. Susan Ash. Ms. Ash has been at the helm of the Health, Science, and Services Authority of Spokane County, the HSSA, since its inception in 2009 and recently retired in February of 2023. Under her leadership, HSSA has provided over $13 million in funding in Spokane County. Nearly $9 million was invested for comprehensive research and infrastructure needs in the region. HSSA also began providing small grants to support grant writing efforts of startups to increase the likelihood of these companies receiving federal or other significant funding that allows the continuation of research that may lead to commercialization. In the early days, she helped to bring well-known researchers to WSU to help jumpstart its research efforts. Her life science research funding achievements as HSSA Executive Director include assisting with funding the WSU Core Health Research Laboratories on the Spokane campus, providing initial funding for the Steve Gleason Institute for Neuroscience, funding BSL-1 wet lab equipment for Life Science Incubator SP3NW, supporting the Spokane Regional Health District's quality of life research. Alongside these research supports, HSSA provided over $4.5 million in access to care grants to deserving nonprofit institutions and others who tirelessly work to improve the health of underserved community populations. During the COVID-19 pandemic, HSSA was an immediate funding source to help impacted communities as others organized their efforts. Ms. Ash's HSSA work is just the latest in a series of roles that have had positive impacts on the Spokane region. During her 50-year career in Spokane, she dedicated herself to economic development and achieving equitable benefits and opportunities for all our citizens. Ms. Ash has been and always will be a rock star in Spokane and is a deserving winner of the Buster and Nancy D. Alvord Award. Ms. Susan Ash.
Hi, I'm Susan Ash. I very much want to thank the leadership at NWABR for the Nancy and Buster Alvord Award. I'm certain not very many of us could live up to their legacy. They were advocates and supporters of bioscience research and of broader community needs. I was profoundly humbled by this recognition. And in addition to thanking you, NWABR, I want to thank the Health Sciences and Services Authority and its board for providing me the opportunity as its executive director to lead in the life sciences arena in our region. Thank you again.
So this is the part of the gala when I ask you to consider making a donation to NWABR. Now, the prevailing wisdom in nonprofit circles is executive directors should never get out and be involved in helping to ask for money. I think the concern is that we might have a vested interest, that we might be a beneficiary of that money, so therefore people may not trust us so much. However, in this case, because I'm leaving NWABR, and this will be my last gala, I think I'm in a good position to actually tell you about why we need you to give donations to us. The core cost of NWABR are met by our member fees and the fees that the people come to our conferences for. The things that we don't get funded for, the things that we need to raise money for, is our work of public engagement. And put simply, if we just talk to science, if we just talk within our own community, then we will lose trust. What we have to do as an organization is we take the information that we've learned from you all, from science, and then we share that with the community. That's our broader outreach work. And that's the thing that we raise money for. And just to give you 3 examples of that kind of outreach work, I've mentioned our summer camps earlier. So those summer camps have every year between 125 and 175 students. And we introduce these students to the complexities of real life science. Those camps are hard. The students really have to commit for those week-long programs. But those kids, those young people, they are going to become the future physicians and scientists and researchers that will be driving our work. They'll be the ones that will pass the building of the Domo too in the very near future. And so we really want to support those kids coming into the camp. And the camps are expensive, and so the money raised tonight helps to fund those camps, and it also helps to fund scholarships for kids who, students who cannot afford to come to the camps and pay for the normal fees. The money raised tonight also helps to run Research Ambassadors Program. The staff at NWABR and I, we do presentations to literally thousands of people every year. And it's very effective. We're very good at getting the message about biomedical research out, but we're only a small staff. And so research ambassadors are people that we've trained to be great science communicators. And then they can take these ideas, these thoughts, these ways of actually saying in a compelling way what they do to a broader lay community and extend these thoughts out to a much, much, much larger number of people. And one of the things we do with the Research Ambassadors Program is we run what is an essentially free conference. And this year, Jen Robleski is running this on October the 19th at Fred Hutch. And this year, we're going to focus on how we use social media to get our messages out in a positive way, and maybe to even counter some of the anti-science messages that we see. And lastly, we run our own social media campaigns, and Jen Robleski, who I just mentioned, also runs those campaigns. When I first started in NWABR, it was a good month if we got 25 or 50 people who saw our website or our social media pages. Over the last summer, with the campaigns that Jen has run, we've got positive messages about research in front of 1.75 million people. And that's really powerful because there are so many anti-science messages out there. And so this positive messaging starts to counter some of that anti-science, anti-research stuff that we see. At NWABR, all that work costs us about $120,000 a year, and we do it, I think, very efficiently. And we need to raise about half of that money each year, about $60,000 a year in donations. The board of NWABR has already stood up, and they've committed $20,000 to that. So that's money that they have personally pledged to help raise that $60,000 target we've got. And they pledge it as a challenge grant. So basically, if you give a donation of $1, then the challenge grant will match that. So you essentially get a $2 benefit for your $1 donation. My wife and I have also personally committed to this work. So even though I'll be leaving NWABR, I want to give the new executive director, who will be hopefully chosen in the next few weeks, every chance of success in their new role. For this reason, we have personally pledged $5,000 this year to NWABR to help the organization to remain strong during this transition. So this is where you can help. Please consider making a donation to NWABR today. As I mentioned, many of those donations will be matched by the contributions from the board challenge grant. So if you're interested in making a donation to NWABR and you're in the room here, then you'll have a paper form in front of you where you can give us your details and your credit card numbers, and we'll run those in the next few days. Alternatively, you can use the QR code in that form, and that'll take you straight to the NWABR donation site, and you can just do everything electronically. For those of you in the room, for those of you who are virtual, you can also use that QR code. You can use your device to use that QR code to go straight to our giving site. Or if you want to, you can go to our NWABR website, www.nwabr.org, and you can hit the Donate Now button, and that will take you to our giving site. So we're going to give you a few minutes. We'd love it if you can make some generous donations to us. And when we return, Jen Robleski, who's the engagement manager at NWABR, we'll close out the gala with a few thank yous and a few messages where, some ideas where you can further help to extend the work of NWABR. Thank you all so much, and thank you so much for the privilege of allowing me to work with you these last 10 years.
Thank you all so much for being here this afternoon. I am the last person that you have to listen to. So thanks for hanging in with me while I wrap things up. I'd like to acknowledge our Gala sponsors once again: Advara, WCG IRB, DML Insurance, Pharma, and We Work for Health. Their generous support means that everything we've raised this afternoon will go toward our programs that build public trust. I'd also like to celebrate our awardees. Dr. John Roll, thank you so much. Ms. Ramsey Cox, thank you so much. Dr. Don Lowe, thank you. Dr. Walter Erba, and Ms. Susan Ash. I also want to thank NWABR's board members who, as you've heard, have collectively contributed over $20,000 of their own money to NWABR's programs ahead of this event. Their generosity is incredible, and it shows their commitment to our mission and vision and how much they value what we do. I can't allow the day to go by without thanking Ken on behalf of NWABR board and staff for your incredible contribution to NWABR. And I know that we will all miss you personally and professionally, and I can't talk any more about this or I will lose it. I sincerely want to thank all of you for spending time with us this afternoon. Biomedical research in the Northwest is very fortunate to have your commitment and talent. Thank you. This brings me to our request, which is we all should be talking more about biomedical research. Communicating about our work is essential to building the public's trust in our efforts. If you do so in writing, I'd encourage you to use the Thanks Research hashtag, which, as Ken alluded to, is a way to drive folks to our Thanks Research campaign, with the goal of building public awareness about biomedical research in the Northwest and how all of you are tackling this gnarly stuff head on. We did reach over 1.5 million people this summer with that campaign alone. If you'd like support doing this kind of communication work, as Ken mentioned, I would love for you to join me on October 19th at the Hutch for our annual communication workshop. It's designed to help us communicate to public audiences like your mom and like my father-in-law. Hi, Bob. And so we'd love to have you join us to learn together a little bit more about how we can advocate for science. This kind of work is so important that some of the funds that we've raised today are going toward making that workshop essentially free. So thank you again for being here. Thanks, research, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day. If you're here in person, feel free to linger and visit with folks. As we mentioned earlier, there's no big rush to get out the door. So